Good evening. I hope that you're all full. You're probably all going to get sleepy here before too long, especially if I start droning on and on. Anyway, they contacted me to come up and kind of share a little bit of my own personal history, my career path, and some of the jobs that I've had, some of the interesting work that I've been able to do, and some of the things that I've been able to accomplish in my career path. So I think I'll start off a little bit with a little bit of background of where I actually started. So when I was a kid, a teenager, one of the first jobs that I had is I worked with the summertime program. I worked on a farm, and I did all the farm labor that you can imagine. We baled hay, we did fences, cleaned out ditches, and a lot of snakes along with that. But a lot of that kind of work is where I first started, just kind of doing those manual labor kind of jobs. And that kind of kicked off my desire to have change in my pocket, to have money so I could buy things. And so when I went back to school, started school again for, I think it was high school, I had other odd jobs throughout my school career. So I worked in a bowling alley at one point, I worked in a donut shop at one point, I ended up managing convenience stores, I worked in a grocery store. I even had a paper route that I had at one time. Kids probably don't know what a paper route is. Got most of the paper anyway. So, but yeah, I did that. I carried the two bundles over my shoulder, one in front, one in back. Walked around through the papers at dog and cat milk. Kind of just throw them on the porch, and and the Sunday papers were the big Sunday papers, that you see in the old movies. But yeah, we had to have all those. So that's how I kind of started out, as just having these odd jobs. But the first job was the one that led me to have the desire to work, to keep working, to have that money, to save, and to acquire, and to buy things that I wanted, and sometimes to help out the family. Family was poor, and we struggled quite a bit. Parents struggled quite a bit to find work. Both my parents did manual labor most of their lives, and I was going to be the first college graduate in my family. And so there was a big responsibility that goes along with that. But I had some good teachers along the way. I had some good teachers that were actually bosses. They taught me how to be a boss, how to lead, how to trust your workers, how to train your workers so that you don't have to retrain them. If you want somebody to do a job, you train them to do the job, and then you leave them alone. You have to put your trust in them to be sure that they're going to accomplish the task. But you have to show them how to do that task. And you build a lot of trust that way. And I have to say that one of the best things that ever happened to me was I worked in a convenience store. And I first started there working the night shift, worked myself up to a day manager. Then I had to start hiring people. And that's when I first started to learn how to read people, how to interact with them, ask questions, to see how they responded to me. And you'll probably hear this sometimes in your career, is like, was that person hungry? So are they hungry for that job? What did they say that convinced you they want that job? How did they interact with you? What was their demeanor? Did they respond quickly? Were they slow? Did they hem off? Did they look around? Did they look at the floor? You can tell a lot by somebody's demeanor on whether or not it's going to be a good employee and somebody who can actually follow directions. But working in a convenience store helped me learn how to read people, how to figure out who's going to be a good person to work with. The hardest position to fill in a convenience store, can you tell me what that is? 24-hour service. It's the night job. It's a person who's there overnight. You're asking somebody to come in and stay all night, stay up. Guess what happens about 1 o'clock in the morning in the convenience store? Bars let out, right? You get this influx of people, inebriated. They're not behaving well. And sometimes they just come and show up at your store in masks because find somebody who has the ability to manage a store, to manage people, you know, to be that person, to handle that influx of challenging people. And oftentimes, they're on it. There's nobody else to help them. I've done that job. It was a fun job. I enjoyed it. I liked managing those kind of folks. It was fun. Some of them were very amusing. Some of them were very challenging. But you learn something all along the way. Because you learn how to interact with people. You learn how to get them to do things that you need to do, whether it's a customer that won't leave or somebody who is looking for something that you just don't have. Somebody shows up that doesn't have money. That's a challenge. And they're very poor. It's a real challenge. So, after going to school, high school, graduated, I started off on my academic career. I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder. I started in the summer program. Was lucky enough to get like a jump start with that program. Had a great time with the summer program. My grades were great. There was a lot of support there. A lot of people helping me along. Then we came to the first semester. First semester wasn't too bad. First semester was a lot of fun. You know, a lot of kids that are, you know, my age coming in, and the whole campus was filled with a lot of people. Football season's happening, a lot of activities happening. And then, in the fall, ski season started, just before the holidays. And I got introduced to skiing when I was in Colorado. And I had way too much fun. I did. One of the hardest challenges for me is focusing my attention because there were so many distractions. And you gotta remember, I grew up in Kansas, no skiing, it's all flatland. So as I was in the mountains of Boulder, you know, all these activities, all the snow and anything else that goes along with that, it was a lot of fun. And my grades started to suffer really bad. It was hard. And I tried to stay in there. I tried to find a job and keep myself alive, but jobs in Boulder are very few and far. They really are. There's really not much manual labor there. You can't hardly make a living there in Boulder. So I had to come home, and I did. And that was hard. It was hard. So I returned to home in Kansas, and I think I went almost a year without work. Then I had to stay home with my parents. I was a young man, early 20s. That was hard. And I was used to working almost all my life anyway. So I did find a job eventually, started working, and I started managing a convenience store. Started out as a night shift person, worked my way up, and then I started to travel around the state of Kansas because the company I worked for had several stores around the state of Kansas. They were opening stores here and there. They would have turnover, and they would send me as a night manager to go in and help clean up stores and to basically fire people and then go and hire new crews and train people. It was a great job at the time. It was a really great job. The pay was decent, but the hours were long. Very, very long. And I wandered around the state for quite a while. Went to Emporia, Kansas. Went to other areas in southern Kansas, Katy, Kansas, other areas, places that you wouldn't even know about. They are so small. And sometimes the only store they had in town was a convenience store. And I was working, double shifts, trying to make a living. It was one of those nights that I had to pull a shift for somebody who did not show up to work. And I had to come in and pull a midnight shift. After working all day, I had to work all through the night again. And then cover my shift the next day. So basically almost 3 shifts a day. And I was sitting on the counter, nobody was in the store, and I started just asking myself, what am I doing? I'm killing myself here, trying to make a living, and barely making a living. I mean, sure, I could pay a few bills. I had a little change in my pocket, but I couldn't save anything. You just don't make that kind of money when you're working in a convenience store. You're barely scraping by. And it's just difficult. It's just real difficult to make a living. And so that was my reality check. I had to figure out what I could do to get myself back to school
so that I could actually try and have a career and make a decent wage and have money to support myself. So that was what I had, was my own little moment to realize what I needed to do. So I went back into another area in Kansas and was working in a convenience store, but I found a job working on a loading dock in a Kmart warehouse in Emporia, Kansas. And that opened me up to actually take night classes at Emporia State. So that's what I did. Went back to school, and I decided that I would pursue an accounting degree. And so it took me a while, going to school part-time, but I was able to do that, to get that accounting degree. Graduated, and then after graduation, I actually went to work for the state of Kansas. And I started out as a bookkeeper for the state of Kansas, working for the Arts Commission. That was a lifetime ago. And I did state of Kansas accounting work for about 10 years, doing the bookkeeping, and then became a full-fledged accountant for them. And then all the time that I was doing that, we had a changeover in executive directors. One of the directors asked me if I wanted to expand what I was doing and do something more than just accounting work. And so he took me from behind the desk, and he took me to a trip to Washington, D.C. to go meet with the National Endowment for the Arts. He says, you need to get to know the guys that have the purse strings that you work with, that you have the drawdowns, that you file your paperwork to get our grant money to come in and flow through the state of Kansas. Because we were having some difficulties in getting that to happen very quickly. So I went out there with him, and that was my introduction into basically trying to, I guess it was just relationship building. I didn't know much about it at the time. I learned how to read people while I was with the convenience store, but I didn't really know how to build relationships beyond that. Well, my director at the time, he was the one that introduced me to that. So we actually went up there, had a tour. I got to meet the folks that were there. We went to lunch. We had a lot of time to engage, to talk about our own lives and what we're doing. And then I came back to Kansas, went back to work, and it was amazing that that trip really loosened up a lot of purse strings. It smoothed the process for us in the state of Kansas. A lot of things happened a lot sooner, a lot faster, because now I could pick up the phone and talk to these folks directly, one-on-one, because I knew who they were. I knew what their role was. I knew what their job was. I knew what control they had, and who I had to talk to get the work that I needed done to get it completed. And ever since then, my life has been along that path as far as making those connections, doing the outreach, getting to know people, getting to know what their wants and needs are, what their role is in their specific jobs in a tribe, in a corporation. What is it you're trying to accomplish? And how to make those connections with those different folks. So that's kind of been what I've been doing for most of my career. And it started through the work that I did with the Arts Commission. But at the same time, once I completed my education, I also looked for all the opportunities that I could to do professional development. Now, in your career path, you'll have opportunities to do continuing education after you graduate, get into your career, get into your job. There are going to be opportunities for other conferences, other training opportunities, and I would say take them. Be very judicious in what you want to learn, but take them. Take every opportunity that you can, because your companies are going to pay for this. You'd be foolish to ignore that opportunity. While I was with the Arts Commission, I found myself doing a lot of work with tribes, and I found myself mediating a lot of disputes between the tribes and the state of Kansas, informally. And I thought, well, you know what? There's probably some training out there that would help me manage this aspect of my job a lot more. So I found the training. It was with the state of Kansas, Supreme Court, mediation training. And I went through that training and became a Kansas Supreme Court mediator. I did that for about 7 or 8 years while I was with the state of Kansas. I did that. There was also an opportunity to learn more about emergency management. We didn't have anybody representing tribes or tribal interests in emergency management in the state of Kansas. Somebody contacted me and said, hey, would you like to go take some training out in Emmetsville, Maryland, believe. At the National Fire Training Academy, they have a tribal curriculum, and I took the entire tribal curriculum. It was all paid for. The state of Kansas paid for all that training. I have maybe, I don't know, 25 different classes that I took at Emmitsburg of all different aspects of safety, of emergency management, of hazardous material transportation, hazardous material, emergency response, tribal continuity of operations, being sure that if something happened to a tribe, how could they function as a government off-site? Do they have a storage facility for all their records off-site somewhere if there's a tornado or any other natural disaster that can happen? So all this training is still in my head. I've learned all this through Emmitsburg. So I think the thing that you really need to keep in mind as you start your careers is that take advantage of those opportunities for education. You really need to do that. Because once I got the training for the emergency management, I left the Arts Commission and found that they were looking for a tribal liaison for the governor's office, and I applied for that position. And I got the job, working for a Republican administration, and did that job for a number of years. Then there was an opportunity that came up with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, BNSF Railroad. So I went from working for with the Kansas tribes, 4 tribes in Kansas, about another 4 tribes in Oklahoma that had interests in Kansas. So I went to working with 8 tribes to working with 89 tribes all across the BNSF Railroad, the western 2/3 of the United States. So I was on the road 80% of the time, all over the country. Pacific Northwest, Albuquerque, Navajo country, on into Arizona, California, you name it, I've probably been there. It was a challenge though, because the trade-off was I was never home. Sometimes I would be home on the weekends, sometimes I wouldn't, it would just depend. But the work was really, really great because I got to interact with all these different tribal entities, all these different tribal governments and tribal leaders from across the country. So it was a challenge for that. And it was a hard job to leave because of the work was so enticing. But the support there for the family, the support there for my own time, my own health was not there. And so I had to make a change. So a few years ago, I moved back to Kansas. I did have an office in the railroad, working on the Kansas City office for a while. But then there was an administration change. And there was a new governor coming into the state, a new administration, Democratic administration. I decided to see if they were still looking for somebody to do the tribal relations efforts. Sure enough, they were looking for somebody at the time. So I applied for the job, got the job that I'm in now. And so now I have the experience of working in corporate America, working with 86 different tribes. I have all that experience to bring into this relationship building effort that this new administration has. So I think they're getting a bargain for what they're getting as far as my experience that I've had. But I never would have thought years ago when I was skiing down the hills and mountains in Colorado that I was having so much fun, that I would be having just as much fun now in this career as I'm having right now. So I guess my closing words for you are take advantage of every opportunity that you can for training. You never know where it's going to lead you. You never know what connections you're going to make. And you never know how many friends you're going to make when you do that kind of outreach for yourself. So that's all I have to share for you.